Welcome to Senior Speak New Hampshire. I'm Dan Wise, your host and a volunteer for AARP, which is a sponsor of this show. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Ann Kuster, who served Concord and the surrounding communities of the 2nd District as a representative in Congress from 2013 until 2025, when she decided to retire rather than run for a 7th term in Washington. Before her election to Congress, her first public office, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Your first public office, Ann Kuster was a lawyer and public policy advocate and a leader in a number of community organizations in the state and Concord area. And most notable for us here at Senior Speak, in 2006, she co-authored a book, a co-memoir in a sense, with her mother, Susan McLean, who was, in the book, I believe, began as a series of intra-family emails. And it's an intimate portrait of a vibrant and intelligent woman being overtaken by Alzheimer's, and it's about how Susan McLean's family and Ann Kuster's family navigated that passage. The book, The Last Dance, Facing Alzheimer's with Love and Laughter, provides a lot of insights into what being an ambitious woman was about in the 60s, 70s, and 80s for Susan McLean, who served in the legislature as a representative and as a senator from 1969 to 1984, while raising a family, which included Ann Kuster, our guest. And thank you very much for coming on.
Great to be with you, Dan.
To Senior Speak. There are a lot of great stories in this book, and a lot of straight talk about the struggles of losing someone to this devastating disease. There's a lot in there about being a caregiver. And looking back on your book, which is now 20 plus years ago, and I guess even a little 25 years ago since you really started putting it together with your mother's reminiscences. How do you think your perspective and society has changed in its view of caregiving and the challenges of caregiving in our current society, and about how we see mental disorders like Alzheimer's? How do you think things have changed, if at all?
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. For me, the biggest change is I'm 25 years older, turning 70 in September. And so this feels much more current and tangible for me. I think, society has changed dramatically in terms of addressing these issues, whether it's Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, aging generally, and other mental health situations, depression, anxiety. There still is some stigma, though. I mean, it's the reality of the situation, and you have to deal with it both as a patient and as a family. My mom was very well known. She'd been in the New Hampshire legislature for 25 years. And she had a lot of people who recognized her wherever she went. And as she started to fail, she couldn't speak, she couldn't respond, she couldn't remember. There were times in the very beginning where it was hard. I remember my father saying, "Oh, Susan, don't start a story you can't finish." It was sort of embarrassing. But then over time, I think one thing that I am really proud of is that we handled it in a very candid, forthright manner. And at one point, we were sort of following, there was a book at the time called Tuesdays with Maury, if you remember that.
Right.
And so we called it Fridays with Susie. And I would go over, my kids were young, and I was a lawyer at the time, and my husband was. We were very busy, but I would go to her house on Friday mornings with a tape recorder and just talk about her life. And she really led us through this process. I remember a friend of mine saying to me, "You're not writing a book, your mother is channeling a book through you." And that was really how it happened.
I wish more people would would realize the value of doing
it was
that.
very therapeutic for all of us.
Yeah.
And part of it for me, she had an extraordinary life. She was very, I'd call her a trailblazer. She was really on the front edge of a lot of the change for women in the 70s and 80s and 90s when she was in the legislature and leading on these issues. And I wanted to be sure that my children and now grandchildren would know her story, would know that she had had a prominent role in positive change in our society. And so that's kind of how it started. We joke it started as the world's longest email to my siblings, just bringing them up to date. I think communication is really important for families that are dealing with issues around aging and parents and inability to continue life the way it always had been. And so the first draft of the book was just sort of a family process. We took it down to capital copy, and my parents sent copies to friends and family. And I remember my brother on the West Coast, his wife turned to him and said, "You need to read this book and you need to go home." And he did. And he came and he put railings up all around their condo. And it brought our family together in understanding what all was entailed in coping with this.
Yeah, that's an important element. And actually, something I was thinking of is that your book portrays a robust family structure, but not everyone has that. What advice would you give for people who maybe don't have other siblings, or they don't have a large family to make it through what they know is coming to be going to be a difficult journey?
I think that's what's going to be hard for our generation. The families are so much smaller. I'm the youngest of five children, so we had more people to get on board to help. I think, my husband and I have two children, and many have one child, or maybe there are no adult children that can help. I think those are the really challenging situations, and trying to plan far enough ahead. If it's a family with resources, you can make arrangements for assisted living so that those activities of daily living, of cooking and cleaning and taking care of a household, doing laundry, that became way too much for my mother. She had taken care of all of us for the first 70 years, but for the next 5 years, she wasn't able. My dad stepped up and learned how to take care of certain things, and I think you can make sure that within your family, that the sort of one link that can't be lost, that everybody is prepared to be helpful. But I think for those who don't have the resources, society has not really been kind on the concept of caregiving, making caregiving more readily available. I mean, we do have senior daycare, and I think that's critically important. But often it's a situation where people need to create community. I think what I'm hearing much more about now are co-housing, where people are moving into housing, whether or not they have a familial or a romantic relationship, but that they might move in as roommates to share those burdens over generations. And I think that's another model that
might be
work.
something that might help with, because the younger generation is having trouble buying, getting into housing, getting a real house.
Well, and the whole, as we adapt with these ADUs, the accessory dwelling units that are being built, I know in my neighborhood we have several of them. They can be very attractive. But as that evolves, in the first instance, that may be a family member that's moving to that property. But over time, that may not be. It may be a caregiver. It may be a partner in caring for each other. So I think the models will evolve as the expense of the caregiving gets out of reach for most families economically.
This is something that AARP highlights as a priority, is caregiving. And in fact, when we go on the political campaign trail, we've been asking candidates, is there a role that you think the government could play or other parties for supporting caregivers? Because I mean, it is not just a burden, but it's something that affects the workplace. It affects the productivity of people in the workforce, and it's caregiving. You could talk about it from taking care of your parents, or you can also talk about what support we provide for the people who are taking care of their children or disabled folks.
Yeah.
What do
the
you
model has
think?
really shifted over 50 years, and I think the government version is based very much on the unpaid labor of women in the family. And so the concept of a spouse, a wife at home, raising the children 100%, the husband coming through the door with his hat and his pipe at 5 o'clock, and taking care of seniors. Many of those families, in reality, there were grandparents that the spouse was taking care of children and seniors at the same time. We refer to that as the sandwich generation, which is where we were with my mother.
Yeah.
Now, life is so different. With 2 income earners in the family, just to make ends meet, or to have all the things like the braces and the summer camp and college that a lot of families would like to have.
Yeah.
And so who is it that's going to be able to care for both children and seniors and disabled? We should include in the conversation. Yeah. When I was in Congress for 12 years, I worked very closely with my colleagues and with people in the advocacy community to expand that definition of what the role of government is, because you put your finger right on it. We don't hesitate to pay for the infrastructure that is the underpinning of our economy, the roads and bridges and highways that get people to work and home at the end of the day. Then we have a big chunk that we call education, where the children from age 5 or 6 through to age 18 are cared for and educated and have a place. But when we tried to expand those definitions to increase childcare down to 3- and 4-year-olds going for childcare in the public school system, it's a very viable option. Yeah. Washington, D.C. already has it. 3-year-olds go to the public school. 4-year-olds go to the public school. It has lots of advantages. It's year-round. There were teachers. There's food served. There's all these advantages as an institution rather than these individual private daycares trying to manage. But the resistance came. We passed it in the House. The resistance came in the Senate, and the critical vote, Senator Manchin, still was of the generation. That's a personal problem. That's not. Yep. And so what we need, and what I'm working on, is to have more women in Congress so they're at the table telling their stories of caring for both their children and their parents and disabled children, and needing viable support so that they can get back to work and focus on their role in the economy.
Well, great. Well, let's turn to something a little lighter. I'd like to know why did you retire, when you did, and what are you doing these days that excites you?
Thank you. Well, I retired. Now, this is kind of ironic about aging. I was 68 years old, and I have a life at home. Now I'm 69 and a half, and 2 new grandsons, and we ski all winter, and we enjoy the lakes and the mountains all summer. And I wanted to come home to my family. I also, truth be told, had found that the Congress was more and more divided and divisive, and it was more difficult for me working across the aisle and representing my constituency that was only 30% Democrat, 30% Republican, 40% in the middle, and I wanted to be able to do that work in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, now it's interesting, we have another senator who also voluntarily has retired.
Which is even harder, by the way, in the Senate, because her colleagues are well into their 80s.
Yeah, so I feel it's great because it's good to see some new generations
again,
come in.
The
with a
candidates
generation
running,
perspective.
Chris Pappas has great experience in the House, and he's probably 20, 30 years younger.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
So another thing that I wanted to touch on, but before we wrap up too, is that another AARP priority is Social Security, and the official projections are that in something like 11 years or so, the trust fund will not be able to pay full benefits unless there's some change made. But it's 11 years is, to some folks, is an eternity. How many election cycles away is that?
Yeah.
How
This
is
one
it
is
that
getting
we will...
easier and easier, I think, to explain and to understand, which is we need to increase the cap on the earnings that are included in the Social Security tax. And so for most Americans, 100% of our earnings we're paying the Social Security tax, paying into the system.
Right.
But because we have a cap, the wealthiest Americans are not paying 100%, and some of them are paying a mere rounding error in their funds. And so I think, in all fairness, we need to raise the cap. And my understanding from the experts and the people that are doing the math behind it,
Yep.
that we can absolutely make Social Security solvent in perpetuity. Now, at the same time, the society is really beginning to understand what these now billionaires, they're going on to be gazillionaires, what their role and what their impact is on the society and on the government financing. Typically, whenever this conversation came up when I was in Congress, it was people wringing their hands about deficits and this is going to cost too much. But the reality is what this administration has added to the deficit with tax breaks for billionaires will absolutely cover anything we need to do with Social Security and fill that deficit. And so for me, I just think it's really important that these individuals and their companies should pay their fair share of the burden, pay their fair share of taxes. And it's always shocking to me to see these lists of, the very billionaires that are jetting around with the president are the ones that aren't paying a dime. And it's just a question of basic fairness, but it does have to do with the solvency of Social Security and of our government.
It's hard to get Congress to think about something that far off, even if it isn't that far off.
I think it's something that they think about, and I think the solution is at hand. I don't think the people who are in charge right now want to fix it. I don't think they care. They're not relying on Social Security income, the wealthiest among us. But I think it's absolutely critical. In my district, most seniors were relying, many on solely Social Security income, and then others on Social Security plus savings, retirement savings. But I think if you were to survey the population in New Hampshire, you could probably count on one or two hands the people that didn't need any income from Social Security because, I don't know how many billionaires we have, but it's not very many.
Well, great. Well, thank you. I want to thank you for coming on the show with us.
Good to be with you.
It's great, and I wish you many hours of enjoyment with those grandkids. And thanks.
Thanks very much, Dan. Good to be with you. Thank you.